I've been debating like this inner dialogue with myself for the last day and a half if I should even talk about this or upload this video because it's kind of dumb, but it's not. It's kind of weird and it's kind of sad. It's unusual to have so many encounters with strange behavior from people in a 24-hour period, which is what happened yesterday. And it started off with me sitting in my golf cart outside, and it was windy. And I hear a voice. It was very faint, um, just like coming. And so I'm looking around, like, is somebody talking to me? Because there's nobody really around. Most people already left work. And then I hear it again, and I turn around, and there's a guy behind me. And he's like in a really faint voice, like almost in a whisper, asking me, "Do you have jumper cables?" And I'm like, "I'll go check my car." I mean, his look and his gaze was off putting and odd. So I'm like, I go check my car and I have jumper cables. So about 5 minutes later, I return and he asked me who I am. And I said, "I'm the guy who you asked for jumper cables 5 minutes ago." And he's like, "Oh, well, you look totally different, even though I looked exactly the same." So we try starting his car, but it's no good. He insists, like he was obsessively sitting there trying to start his car, even though obviously it's not going to start. And his behavior this entire time was just incredibly unusual and very unfriendly and rude and almost a very off-putting encounter. Like I've given people jumps before, and they don't usually behave like that, especially coming up behind me and like almost whispering in my ear for jumper cables. Like he didn't have a problem with his voice or anything. So I go. So about an hour later, the homeless guy comes on in the area, and I'm like, I ask him if he needs help, and then I told him he has to leave. And he comes up, he's like begging for water, like he hasn't drank in days, and he looked like he hasn't drank in days, and he looked like he was on meth, which does diminish your thirst and hunger. So I'm like, sure, I'll get him some water, whatever. Um, and right, this strange behavior is explainable, sort of, right? The guy's homeless, probably on drugs, except even in even in that circumstance, this guy was super weird. He was very he had that same blank stare. He had that same blank face that the guy for with the jumper cables. Um so I'm like, okay, so same thing. I like go out and I get him water and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll even give him $5. Hopefully he'll buy some more water or something. Like, okay. And I come back and I give him the water and he like just like aggressively grabs it, starts drinking, and then he turns around and I'm like, "Hey, I have $5 for you." And he like looks at it like it's something he's never seen before in his life. He grabs it and stares at it for an incredibly uncomfortable long period of time. And I'm just sitting there like 2 feet away from this guy, wondering what the hell is going on? Like he's never seen money before because that's what he looked like. And now I'm like, I told him he had to leave, and thankfully he did. And I'm glad I had my weapons on me just in case, because he could have, people like that you don't want to mess around with. You should keep your distance. But even in that scenario where he was probably under the influence, it was really strange. But it didn't end there. There was another encounter that I'm not even going to talk about because it's somebody I know that was acting weird. So I'm going to skip over that one, but it's on the same day. And then at night I go to another site on Saturday nights to just like be at this office thing. And I go over there and there's this old beat up car sitting right like parked right in front of it, which nobody ever does because it's a fire lane. And I go over there, do my usual thing, and turn off the alarm. And this guy comes up to me, same blank stare, like asking me, "Are you supposed to come in and relieve me?" And I'm like, "Come in where? I don't know who you are." And he's like, "Oh, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how long I'm supposed to stay here and who's supposed to come after." And I'm like, "Do you work for somebody? Like, what are you?" I asked him, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I work for somebody and you're supposed to be my relief." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not your, like, you have nothing to do with me." And so I kind of just let it go and just go. I went into the office, closed the door. And about 10 minutes later, he comes up to the door and he asks me again if I'm supposed to come and relieve him with that same blank stare. So I'm like, okay, uh, am I the one going crazy or is everyone else going crazy? Because the whole day just made no sense. Okay. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm the sane one right now. I feel pretty sane. So I just wanted to tell you guys that story of yesterday.